Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this online event from the Ballard Institute and Museum of Puppetry, Up the Winding Path, My Artistic Journey with Albrecht Roser, an interview with Sarah Frechette. This is kind of the first of our post-spring semester Ballard Institute online events. We've been doing a bunch of them throughout ever since the COVID-19 situation changed everything at the university. And we're really happy tonight to have a really interesting discussion with UConn Puppet Arts graduate Sarah Frechette and Bart Roccoberton, the director of UConn's Puppet Arts program, about one of the most influential puppeteers in the 20th century, Albrecht Roser, who had a big effect, a big influence on UConn's Puppet Arts program. I wanted to let you know just a bit about Sarah. She's currently in Oregon, in Portland. She's a touring puppeteer, arts educator, and stop motion animation costumer, and co-founder of the artist collective Nightshade Shadow Theater. And she's done a lot of different shows that we've been fortunate enough to have performed at the Ballard Institute. And one of her newest shows, Dirty Gerts, we were going to present at the Ballard Institute, and then of course that did not happen. And in a way, we're doing this to still be able to share with you some aspects of Sarah's work. I wanted to, and I want to say, Bart Roccoberton is a man who needs no introduction, but he's been the director of the Puppet Arts program at UConn for over 25 years now, and is a masterful 30, or how many, I can't count, at 30 years now, and has had a huge imprint on American puppetry and actually puppetry around the world. So I'm happy that Bart is my colleague. I also teach at the Puppet Arts program, and we're really glad that Bart could be part of this, since Albrecht Roser was, in a way, one of Bart's, or not in a way, was one of Bart's puppet masters, puppet teachers. So I wanted to just briefly explain that Albrecht Roser was a German puppeteer and teacher of puppetry arts. Wait a minute, now I'm going to share my screen. That's what I'm going to do. Okay. Okay. Albrecht Roser was a German puppeteer and teacher of puppetry arts. He was a graphic designer by training and learned the construction of string puppets from Fritz Herbert Bross. I'm reading this from the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts entry on Roser. He recognized the artistic potential of new design principles developed by that point in time. After the war, he became a puppeteer with his creation in 1951 of a new clown puppet, Gustav, who you can see here in the image with Mr. Roser. His string puppet performance, Gustav und sein Ensemble, Gustav and his ensemble, took him on tours around the world from 1956. His puppets are of very high artistic and technical quality, says the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts, built according to the laws of kinetics, and are aus dem Schwerpunkt gespielt, played from the center of gravity, which we'll talk about more. The important thing for Albrecht Roser, this article by Michael Mordo says, is not just the animation of lifeless material, but giving the puppet a soul, a creative unit composed of the puppet, the puppeteer, and the audience. The virtuosity and depth of his shows for adults have been acknowledged with numerous awards. Ingrid Höfer was, for more than 50 years, was Albrecht Roser's partner in the creation, inspiration, and documentation and management of his professional and educational careers. So I always hear Ingrid's name together with Albrecht's. Touring the world together with performances of Gustav und sein Ensemble under the sponsorship of the Goethe Institute, Ingrid opened for the, wait a second, now I'm trying to, okay. change slides. Ingrid opened the path for Albrecht's inspiration and creativity. Together, they taught workshops across the globe and established studies in Figurentheater in the State School of Music and Performing Arts in Stuttgart. And I've just added in these images of Albrecht Roser, who you can see here kneeling with a pretty amazing array of American puppeteers in 1973. And this is Mr. Roser conducting a workshop at the National Puppetry Conference, as you can see. And I'm sure Bart's going to talk about that later. Ingrid is presently consolidating images of Roser's creations, all of which she photographed, written documentation, illustrations, and philosophies into a book that Roser himself titled Schwerpunkt, Gravity. And this is what Ingrid wrote as an introduction to Sarah. Sarah Frechette, fascinated by Albrecht Roser's art, participated through the years in international summer string academies at the University of Connecticut's Puppet Arts program and master classes held in Roser's private studio in Germany. During the last summer academy hosted by Professor Bart Roccoberton at UConn is where Roser saw Sarah perform his Queen of the Night marionette. I'm not sure if that's that marionette, but it's a beautiful puppet. This moment inspired a personal invitation for advanced study at his private studio to further learn his philosophy about the art of string puppetry. The special atmosphere of his huge studio, located in a little village near Stuttgart, was ideal for concentrated work and for an extensive exchange of ideas. Roser's intention, Ingrid says, has been to guide his students to find their own creative path out of experienced knowledge and meditative concentration. By constructing different characters under Roser's guidance, Sarah learned to understand the basic rules about his kinetic art. She discovered her special talent for sculpting puppet heads that can change expression with movement and light. It has been an essential experience for Sarah to follow her own intuition in construction and performance, carving out her own path. During the years, Sarah created her own program of single scenes of string puppets, and these, by the way, are Albrecht's puppets, I think, rather than Sarah's, if I'm not wrong. A variety of creations, every theme deeply connected to her view of life. Her natural presence on stage and her talent for movement, writes Ingrid, made her puppets come alive. The Museum for Puppentheaterkultur in Bad Kreuznach, Germany, invited Sarah Frechette and puppeteer Robin Walsh to perform in 2018 for the festival Marionettissimo with a program von damals bis heute. Excuse my pronunciation. This gave me, Ingrid writes, the occasion to recommend their show to the Zama, a place close to Roser's former studio, and to join them on stage with 2 masked performances. It's been a pleasure for me, Ingrid writes, to welcome the 2 puppeteers, a wonderful connection through the years. The Museum for Puppentheaterkultur in Bad Kreuznach, Germany, is also where Albrecht Roser's program of single marionette vignettes, Gustav und sein Ensemble, as well as many other puppet figures designed by Roser for large stage productions and television, now reside. The Puppentheaterkultur Museum, PUK Museum, will install a permanent exhibit of Roser's puppetry legacy, which is set to open by 2022. I think, is there one more image? Yes, there we go. Then I wanted to make sure to show that and stop sharing the screen and invite Bart to lead us forward in this conversation with Sarah about the fascinating Albrecht Roser.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Yes, you gave us a good sense of his beginning. He was, upon returning from World War II, he was alone and disheartened, and took a job working with Fritz Herbert Bross as a wood carver. And Bross at the time was the innovator in marionette theater. Albrecht liked what he was doing, and Clown Gustav was his first marionette. Interesting that it was the marionette that stayed with him throughout his life. Bross taught Albrecht many different ideas and many theories, and I think he also taught Albrecht a way of teaching others. Bross had all this knowledge that he wanted to give to Albrecht, to give him a foundation from which to grow further. And that was the same idea with Albrecht. Anytime you were in his classes, he gave you his information, hoping that you would use it to grow beyond him. And it was a wonderful experience. I first encountered Albrecht when I became a student in the MFA program at the University of Connecticut. The department head, a gentleman named John Herr, wanted to bring Albrecht in as a guest artist. And I had worked at a community college for a while before coming to UConn. And he said, well, you have university experience. I said, no, community college experience. He says, well, you understand bureaucracy. Help me bring Albrecht here. And so for a year, he and I worked to get Albrecht and Ingrid to come in for a one-semester residency. Of course, with Frank Ballard's blessings. Albrecht and Ingrid came. It was the most remarkable semester I could ever imagine. I still can't imagine that it happened because it continues to influence me to this day. Everything that happened in that semester just fed into the rest of my life. Albrecht was my mentor. He was also very much my friend. And as I was brought in 1990 to take over the Puppet Arts program at the University of Connecticut, much of what I was thinking was what Albrecht had taught me. And so we constantly chatted together. I would ask him questions. What do you think about this? He came over several times. As is mentioned in Ingrid's statement, we hosted the International Summer String Academy that he and Ingrid taught, I think 5 times here at the University of Connecticut. And it was a wonderful 2 to 3 week session where puppeteers from literally around the world would come in and spend intense days, first in the basement of Sprague Dormitory when we were still over there, and then finally into the Puppet Arts Complex. And I know a number of your audience tonight have been to the Puppet Arts Complex. I want to tell you that we have that space because of Albrecht. We were in the basement of Whitney the day that Dean David Woods came onto the campus to lead the School of Fine Arts. And he was touring all the buildings. Here we were in the basement of a men's dormitory in 90 degree plus heat plus humidity. And the boiler from the dorm was still running. And Albrecht was performing with Granny from Stuttgart, his little puppet that talks to the audience. Dean Woods walked in while Albrecht was showing the students what was happening. And Granny looked up at him and said, here we are creating art amongst steam pipes and leaky toilets. And as we were leaving the space that day, Dean Woods said to me, you're moving. 2 years later, we're in our space. So I always thank Granny for getting us there. Albrecht continued to be an influence on me and therefore an influence on virtually every puppet art student that I've worked with over the past 30 years. We study his paper sculpture technique for puppet animation. We study his control techniques for string puppetry. We study his audience relations philosophies so that the puppeteer understands how to control not only what they're doing, but what their audience is giving them. And so I'm very proud and happy tonight that we're turning this evening over to Sarah Frechette, who was one of my students who I convinced to take a summer session with Albrecht. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. It's true. I graduated having very little experience with marionettes, but having seen Albrecht perform and feeling the heart that he projected into his puppets and the heart that his puppets had, I just gravitated right towards it. There was something about the ability to feel and emote emotion through them that I I knew I had to study with him, and so Bart helped connect me with Ingrid and Albrecht, and I went to Germany on an UNIMA USA scholarship, and I studied and made a belly dancer, Marionette, there. I can show you her. She's a really innovative piece of stringing where all the strings go in through her body to the bottom, and I was able to get this real first start, my love for marionettes, my obsession and passion for marionettes through making this figure, because it is performed and moved in ways that I had never yet experienced a puppet. So I'm going to show you, because I do feel an important part of today is to be able to show some of the technique as I talk, and I hope you will agree with that. So this is Ooh La La La, my belly dancer. There are 3 sections: her head, her torso, and her belly, and everything else is just strings. It was Roser's philosophy to show sometimes the simplicity of marionettes, as complex as they are, so that it could be accessible, to use the weight of gravity. There's gravity on her torso and her head, and then you hold the controller in your palm so gently and move it around. Very different than an airplane controller. Bum, 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 bum. So this set off my whole relationship with Ingrid and Albrecht. It all started with the belly dancer, and then I ended up with all these other figures behind me. After attending the belly dancer marionette, I went to UConn for the last International Summer String Academy, which was the magic flute. So the last images that John showed were the Queen of the Night, and then the 2 lovers and Papageno. And performing with the Queen of the Night to start with, Roser said to Emily DeCola and I, no, this is for a man to perform. And if anybody knows Emily and I, we said, oh no, this is for us to show you what we can do. So we hid in the costume shop at UConn in the Puppet Arts program and rehearsed all night with the Queen of the Night. And then the next day, actually, Ingrid caught us, said, oh, we need to show Roser. And when he saw us perform, he says, she's yours. You 2 will perform the 2 arias with her. And then after performing them with the other attendees in this workshop, everybody got characters and parts. We put on a show. He came to Emily and I and said, there are further possibilities to study in Germany when it is right for you and it is right for me. And he walked out, and Emily and I, oh my goodness, what just happened? And so we were able to gather a group of other American puppeteer friends and travel to Germany as Meisterklasse. And for 2 sessions study, for 2 months apiece. He gave us different challenges every time, but we were in his studio in Buoch where the marionettes and puppets hang from the heavens. It's a giant studio that he made during his TV career. And there were these contraptions on ropes and marionettes hanging all around them everywhere. And he would pull them up to the ceiling. So everywhere you looked, there was something that you could pull down and use in order to get ideas of how you would want to continue your studies there. So we had 2 sessions. There was, I'm going to give a little shout out. There was Robin Walsh, Matt Brooks, Emily DeCola, Marta Rudolph, Bojana Delash, Nate Wilson, Dan Luce. And we all lived and ate and studied Roser theories, philosophies, marionettes together. And in the end, I don't think any of our lives have been the same since then. We use his principles. We try to emulate his style of always being the student, always continuing to learn, never calling something finished, always continuing to develop. So it's definitely had a profound effect on all of us. And so the 2 Meisterklasses, he gave us challenges. The first time was to make a head and shoulder marionette, and that will be Spodoba. This is one of the pieces I'm going to show later this evening on a video. So Spodoba is a head and shoulder marionette. He's literally a head, a torso, and hands and draped fabric. This wonderful style of puppet that definitely is not Brass. It is definitely all Roser. The controllers of all the marionettes I have, I can tip a little up, these really odd, this is all Roser. This is absolute innovation of Roser, taking gravity, 3 points of gravity, finding all the ways to use physics to make these figures move having the most possibilities and range of movement. So Shvodova, he said to all of us, make a head and shoulder marionette. You have 2 days. And he left us. We didn't eat, we didn't sleep, and we worked and we worked and we exhausted ourselves. And 2 days later, he came in and we said, Albrecht, we failed. We have a head and hands and no puppet. And he said, yeah, sometimes it takes me a whole year to make a puppet. And so we sort of went to sleep after that for a little bit. And worked for that time to create these figures. And what I discovered through Shvodova, who started literally as a scribble on a piece of paper, an ornamental shape, where I put that on a block of foam and I carved the head, and I followed sort of my intuition and what I was finding as I grabbed different materials to create this prepubescent evil alien slug. I created a real relationship, an actual connection to this puppet. A lot of the wit and humor I have inside of me is absolutely inside of this weird thing. And I was able to make a piece with him where I perform in tandem with him. We have a relationship on stage. We have a connection. We are discovering things from each other, which is also a big thing that Roser did in his pieces. There wasn't always a set story. Maybe there was an idea or a concept or an image or an inspiration he got, and he would sort of follow it, but he wouldn't plan it to start with. So a lot of the figures he made later on, as he's looking in the mirror, almost told him what they wanted to be, which is a great, for me, I find that to have a real release and freedom in creating. It's the other way that I actually struggle with, trying to make a decision ahead of time. I would much prefer to grab the materials and really see what is coming out of them. And then the second time I went to Germany with Meisterklasse, I had been taking care of my grandfather with my mom, and I couldn't get him off of my mind. So I sculpted this clay head, and I was determined when I landed in Buoch that I was going to make this head into a marionette of my grandfather. And Roser pointed at it and said, it is a portrait, it is not a puppet, which was absolute crushing information. And in working together with Ingrid, who has this really great way of knowing what he wants to say and getting that information to you, while also opening you up to hearing it. What I gathered was a puppet is not an exact copy of someone. It is their essence. It is their being. So in what way can you communicate that? So when you look at the figure, you know what it thinks, what it feels, what it wants you to know. And so I started with this simple egg shape because my grandfather ran the chicken barn at the state fair in Vermont, a symbol that was directly related to him. And I took this egg shape and I gave it some giant ears. I basically exaggerated elements of him to create Wally. This is my Wally. Wally has become a very important figure for me as my grandpa passed away not long after I returned from Germany that year. So this is, in a sense, him. And so I brought this figure home and I put him in front of my mom and my brother, and they said, oh, that doesn't look like Grandpa. What you go and do? And I was, again, heartbroken. And I went to my grandpa and I showed him Wally, and he says, well, that's not a puppet of me. It's a puppet of you and me together. And he got it. He's very wise. I couldn't help but put the two things, the parts of us that matched into this figure, as my grandfather was a big influence in me packing my bags and going to Germany, because he always made me feel I could do whatever I wanted. So this is Wally. Also, one of the notes Ingrid, in Ingrid's note, one of the things she said is the fact that sculpture, playing with light and shadow, can change shape. So this head is a very good example of that theory of Roser's, where there's not sort of a defined expression. He's not smiling, so he's not always happy, and he's not frowning, so he's not always sad. But as I, move the figure around, let me see if I can get a little closer to the camera. He can change how inquisitive he looks, or whether he wants to be. Sometimes he gets a little flirty. He can smile when he lifts his head up. He has an absolute different expression when he looks down and his eyes almost close. It's a big part of working and studying with Roser. You really it changes the way you look at shapes, really. All right, Wally, how am I going to get you back up here? All right, well, somehow I need to gain an inch of height in this workshop. There we go. Okay, so he's back. And I even wear Wally here, my little necklace. So that was the Meisterklasse. Those are the things I made, and then later went and did independent studies and got into wood carving, which is a whole other way to make puppets. I actually like the process of taking a material and moving elements away from it. When I have the material and I can add all the time, I feel like the endless possibilities drive me nuts. So wood carving, if you haven't tried it, is a great form. And again, talking about ornamental shapes, the idea was to take a sketch, really, that came from doodles, except for Bad Boy. This is a copy of Roser's. I'll talk about that in a sec. Lady Mai, you make your doodle, you find your ornamental shape, you make a profile, and you make a frontal view, you put it on a block, trace it, cut it out, and throw those designs away. And then you start carving into the grain and seeing where the wood takes you. It's a real, you just have to be in tune. You have to have full concentration. It's almost like Zen and meditation, where you fall into the materials and allow the form to communicate with you. And then Bad Boy was another challenge. I made a piece with Roser's Marionette while in the studio, and he allowed me to tour with it for a year. And then afterwards said, come back and make your own copy. I'm tired of you having my puppet. So I went back, and what I learned in that session in copying this puppet is you can't hide the artist inside the work. Roser's Bad Boy definitely looks more like a criminal. He's a real tough guy. And mine looks like a California surfer dude. So that's the balance. And then he said to me, good people can't make evil puppets. So apparently that's where I'm at. This is all the cuteness behind me.
What do you mean by ornamental shape?
Ornamental. So you just take your paper and your pencil and you look away and you scribble and you look into that shape, and you can find faces. You can find their forehead and their cheeks, or the back of the head and the nose, and then you use those lines to guide. So in a sense, I guess ornamental is an abstract shape that you end up with, and then from that you build the figure on top of it by trying out different things. I guess I'm a big fan of working with others. So being in Germany as an ensemble, someone would lean over and say, oh, have you tried these beads? I found them today. And you move them around and see what you come up with. So there's the gathering of information, absorbing it and mixing it with your own, and then choosing what you want to take and moving forward. So you're inspired by the ideas, but you're not guided by them specifically, sort of just mix in. And Roser's big thing, I think, with all of his students and having us come there was to give all these philosophies, these theories, these principles, and say, and now continue. So and what are you going to do with it? Because there was the step of him working with Brass and what he innovated from that. And then he wants to see where we take it next. Don't just copy all of my stuff. You copy it and learn from it, get what you need to know, and then move forward. And it's go ahead, show me what you got, Sarah. So that's what I think the majority of us who worked with him, who make marionettes, are really trying to figure out what that's going to be. Because it is a process. I mean, he spent 50 years to make his body of work. So, yeah. I could keep talking, maybe, John, if there's something on the list. I know,
yeah,
but not everything, or Bart.
I was thinking maybe we should go to the films in order to see this work in action, and then take up the conversation from there.
That sounds great.
Okay, so our talented producer, technical person, Emily Wicks, who I forgot to mention at the beginning, my colleague at the Ballard Institute, is handling all the behind the scenes things like this video, which Sarah has prepared.
want to give it a try?
Wonderful.
Very nice, Sarah.
So nice. Sarah, a couple of questions came in during the screening of those two videos, and I wonder if those videos are available other places too. But Carol D'Agostino asks, the controllers are unique. Would Sarah talk about the relationship of the unique controller to the puppet and how that dictates movement?
Yes.
And maybe I'm not quite sure what Carol means by unique controller. So
I'll tell you, John.
Very good.
Before I answer Carol's question, I just want to give a shout out to the cinematographer. I got to work with Oliver Lukacs and then Erica Larson from Brookledge Follies, who gave her wonderful theater space for us to create these films. I just figured, why not try something new with these figures? So I made some movies. So I'm going to use Spodoba as the example. I also caught a little bit question about the music. Spodoba, my prepubescent evil alien slug, that was a group called Stimhorn, and they resonate their voices and use alpine horns. And so what you heard, there's just so much more of that. Just Google them. So, I mean, the controllers are all, let me get rid of my prop, made different. This has kind of this, boy, it's hard to do so close. I wonder if I can guide myself away here a minute. Everybody, hang on, going for a ride. Okay, so the controllers to start with, the hands, Albrecht was, his innovation was a 3-point system, not just 2, so that you can have a full range of movement. So on Spodoba's hands, there are 3 strings that come down, and I have put them on this controller bar with some metal loops.
I want to ask a dumb question here for people who might not know about marionette performance. How is the 3-point system different from a 2-point system? Is a 2-point system the more traditional system, and what are those 2 points attached to?
So on the head, the 2 points would be on the sides. So you can sort of do up and down and left and right, but you can't go all the way around. And then the hands, some marionettes just have 1 string to move the hands up and down, or if there are 2, there's just, not that those marionettes can't move beautifully, but there is a limitation. And sometimes within that limitation, it does give the puppet's character, but with this, there are far more possibilities of really intricate, small movements communicating more emotion through the marionettes. I sometimes find there's less chance when they're strung this way to tangle on themselves. And it uses a lot of physics. So depending on where the weight is in the hands and where the points, that the strings match, I mean, you can get a full, you can flip it over, flip it back. And same.
Going back to what Sarah said earlier about Albrecht's use of physics, the simple theorem is 3 points define an object in space.
Yes, thank you, Bart. And technique serves artistic expression essentially. So this controller is as important as the figure that is attached to it. Making the puppet is one thing, and then each controller is different for each figure. There's not a standard controller. It's not a set airplane controller. It's not Philips' awesome paddle controller or a torpedo controller. Every one of these is 100% different. The way that the pieces are measured and caught oftentimes is just done by a lot of chance. You make a plan, you make the controller. If it doesn't work, Roser would hang them above. He had a bunch of rejects. And then you take what you've learned that works and you make another one to improve it. So this sort of, you hold it. So this has the 2 circles, and I'll try to get into I'm gonna see if I can make, Emily, can you make me big? I'm very tiny in the corner. I don't know if that's just.
I think if you look at speaker view, you'll get it.
I look at speaker view. Oh.
On the upper right corner, instead of gallery view, speaker view, maybe.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. Well, this makes me a little bigger to see myself. I'm so tiny up there. So these loops have 3 points, and I can make the hands. Here we go. Try it. Boy, it's hard to do this thing. I can make the hand go all the way around. These tiny little. Oh, no, doesn't help when he's tangled. That's why. Yay, good thing I'm not in an actual show. Okay. Lots of tiny circular movements for the head. There's 3 points. And with this 45-degree angle and this trigger that's here, this is attached to the shoulders. It's a head and shoulder. So again, it's just a head and torso, and it's totally empty under here, no body. But by pulling this controller, I can drop the head way down. I can lift his shoulders, which in turn lift the back. So he can go from being a very upright, like at the end of the video, whoa, to this gnarly leg. Just changes the personality completely. Sort of the theory is that the majority of the weight is at the bottom of the center of gravity too. And so talking with Michael Mordo, everything is becomes much more clear. He's done really well to break down that specific part of Roser's theory. So once that book comes out, there will be a chapter by him explaining more of this. But the very short way to say it is that there's 2 points at the base of the head is one, and Schwodeb is a head and shoulder, but say Wally, it would be at the bottom of his torso. Mm-hmm. So the majority of the weight is put into those 2 places. Mm-hmm. And that anchors and then allows for everything to come around.
We have a number of really interesting questions, and maybe I could ask one too. Again, thinking of a kind of the approach of someone who's not really versed in marionette movement. Why, and maybe this is a question for Bart as well, but what is it about Albrecht Roser's puppet design and movement that marks a difference from and an innovation in marionette movement, which for many centuries was in a way the dominant form of art puppet theater in Europe? But it, the sense I get from both you and Bart is the way that Roser, and your explanation of his control system is part of that, the way that Roser sort of changed things and came up with something new. And I'm wondering, what exactly is that constitutes Roser's innovation in marionette performance and design?
It's sort of like any form of art, he invented this. This did not exist before he made it. This type of controller, this type of thinking about the 3 points. So he essentially innovated this style of marionette, which for some can be a very contemporary form, and for others can already technically be part of a tradition. I mean, this has been around now for 50, 60 years. So depends on which way you look at it. But before Roser, this did not exist. This type of controller, this type of stringing, this type of, this way of looking at the marionette as a partner on stage with these systems. So.
And we have to give credit to Bross.
Oh, yeah.
In the UConn program, we frequently turn to what we call the Bross controller, which is actually an ergonomic controller. I don't have anything handy to hold on to. Traditionally in the US, the airplane controllers you hold this way. Traditionally in Europe, it's a vertical controller. Bross said, but that's not the way our hands work. Our hands hold objects this way. And so the body of the Bross control is ergonomic, which gives you full use of your wrist to move things. Add to that the 3-point system, and you can literally perform a puppet's character by holding your hand in one place and moving it. Albrecht would always say that he would spend a very long time working on the controller because he wanted all the work to be before he went to the stage. When he went to the stage, he wanted to perform. Okay? He saw too many puppeteers playing their controller like a harp. He wanted to go and have the simplest of movements and have the puppet respond to those movements.
Great. There's an interesting question from Eli Zachary Sokolov-Presser, who writes, I'd be interested in hearing a bit more of Sarah's thoughts about her approach to marionette movement. Does she have a training methodology? In what ways has she followed Roser's approach to movement? In what ways has she deviated? That's a series of questions, actually, isn't it? But please feel free to respond, Sarah, in whatever way makes sense to you.
So I think what I've pulled from Roser the most are what I've been able to discover through working with him that I'm capable of doing is putting my own personal life experiences and into the figures by having a figure that is my grandfather, a figure of Spodova that is my essence. Even through these other pieces, I was able to sort of express things that were happening in my life at that time through how I perform them and what I perform with them. And using them on stage as a partner, I think seeing Roser really feel through a scene. So there wasn't necessarily a chase or a climactic moment except within the dramatic line, and how sort of how the performance and story arcs, whatever the story may be. Sometimes it really does come from an emotion or trying to communicate a character's sort of love and hate, like that can be performed. And so I've really adopted that from him. I've tried to also sort of emulate on stage, you know, in answering the question, like, why am I there with this figure? What is my connection to the figure? How do we serve each other? And then performing that and giving that out to the audience and being able to find a way to present those feelings, hit upon a memory, a note, and feel the audience give it back to you. So sometimes performances can be very funny and sometimes they can actually be super serious, and following through with that, because he was very intuitive. He could feel an audience. So those are the things that I really feel I've benefited from the most. Before I met him, I hadn't really performed well with a marionette. I did get my first sense of string puppets from Philip Huber, and then from that went to this German technology, and I don't know, really flourished from there. The way I deviate from this is maybe this isn't. Nobody told me to pick one kind of puppet and stay with it. So besides marionettes, I make shadow puppet shows with Nightshade. I make the Spooky Girls rod puppet videos with the hand in the shadow. I'm now making a podcast series and have interviewed Ingrid and Ali Lukacs and Paul Vincent Davis. Like, nobody told me to choose one thing. So that's how I deviate. I do all the things. Mm-hmm. And when he wasn't doing string puppetry, he did make other forms of puppet, but for the most part, they were also tailored around his paper sculpture methods. Like he seemed to have his ways and he used them to the best of his advantage. And somehow I graduated from UConn and Bart must have known me. He didn't tell me to pick a thing. So that's, I guess, how I deviate the most is I have a...
When asked the question, what puppet do you like best? My response is always the one that works correctly for what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Yes, that's awesome. Yes. So,
I'm intrigued by this, Eli's question. In what ways have you deviated from Roser's approach? Do you feel like, well, when you worked with Roser, you learned certain things from working with him, but you yourself have decided to do something different? And what, if that's the case, what exactly would that be?
So, another part of his work is you're not creating things to perform it in the exact way he would. So there's the technique he's giving you, there's the philosophies, but then the ultimate goal is to find your way of using them. So, I mean, one of the biggest ways I deviate on stage is I'm a solo female performing with these figures, and there are things that I can do in my relationships with them that as a male puppeteer, I don't feel he could. There's a different wit, there's a different humor, there's a younger energy. There's things that I feel I can portray on stage as me that he couldn't, because I am different. And that was never, you were never told not to be. He wanted to see what you were able to bring out of yourself and with the figures you made. So for anybody who I feel has studied with him or fallen into his work, that's kind of the best part of it. You can grab things that maybe are more specific about the technique and the physics and the forms, and then what you're going to do with it, he already knew was different. And that's what he wanted to see. That was a big part of that. It wasn't to limit you. It was to help you find another part of yourself and express it. So I got permission to deviate.
Cool. Jack Fields writes, well, first of all, there's a question from Dave English. How heavy is the puppet? Did you already answer that? I forget.
I've never put him on a scale. They're not Sicilian marionettes. They're not giant hunks of oak. These have blue foam heads, and the bodies. I'm going to bring it closer and show you, because underneath it's all for show, folks. This very simple, very minimal wood in the way that it's jointed, which feels like a full form, but they're pretty hollow, some of these. So a lolly is probably the most substantial as far as the weight goes, but if I can lift a little leg, I mean, make it. It's not all there. So when you start to take away certain things, or say he was too heavy, I would just drill some holes in the center of the wood so that it wouldn't take away from the strength of it, and then you can lighten them up. So he's really, I mean, I don't even know what to guess. It's all distributed, and when you put it on the ground, I mean, it certainly takes a load off. They're not impossible to perform.
There was a question about, I think the one in the red cape, I think it's referring to the Svoboda puppet. Is that, which it seems to me that probably doesn't have much of a body inside at all.
No, just a foam. The shoulders are a wooden block, and from that is a big piece of foam coming off his back, with a little piece of wood, hot glued in the end, so that can pull his body up and down. I mean, it's not like I plan on having only worked on these once and then they'll live forever. I give a lot of wear and tear with the bad boy. When I perform him, I literally step on him and I pull him. So there's a lot of pins I have to change and things. None of them are too heavy. They certainly could be lighter. I know that many other of Roser's students in Germany, Michael Mordo, who sketched all the pictures in the book that was shown, the cover that was shown earlier, and one of the sketches inside was his. He makes them, and he hacks the head off and carves out the inside of the wood. Somehow when I was with Roser, he never told me to do that with these two, so they have solid heads. And Frank Sundla, Raphael Müller, Alice Gottschalk, I think, are also finding ways to perhaps get in there and gut out some of the weight so that the form still though works, because you would essentially take the brain, but you wouldn't want to take anything down here so that the weight is there. But nobody told me to. Maybe I will in the future, maybe I won't, but they work so well, so I just leave it.
There's another question that sort of steps back a little bit to ask more general, for general response. Could Sarah talk about the realities of working/making a living as a puppet performer these days? I'm not sure if that means in our COVID-19 era or just the early 21st century.
Yes, back, because right now we're all sort of floundering a little bit, I feel, right now. But before this, and what I plan to do, sort of when we figure out how to work within this new COVID world, on top of performing with marionettes, I build puppets commercially for stop motion commercials and movies. I costume puppets. I costume for regular theater. I teach puppetry for all ages, all levels. It's important, I think, to have a wide skill set and ability. So when I'm not doing one thing, I can offer up my skills as another, and then find I'm constantly working, constantly doing things. These marionettes I made and have sat for a long time for some reason in my body of work, even with the shows that Nightshade and I have made, because we have about 10 full-length shows now, and as Puppetkabob, I have a repertoire of 4 for family audiences, and I am getting to complete a show with these now. Once Roser passed, a real part of me took a dip, and it's time to get out and figure out what I'm going to do with them. I guess that's one way I plan to deviate. I see what he did in his show, and I know how it worked with all of his scenes in a row and coming out and giving an introduction to them to sort of lead you into what you might experience. But I'm not going to do it that way. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I know not that way. I'm going to do it my way. So as far as making a living performing marionettes, I'm figuring out what that is actually like right now. Sure. So the last 2 falls, it was kind of amazing having the ability to go to Germany with these and put a program together, and was in combination with Robin Walsh, and I had my half and she had her half, and we put Ingrid in between with 2 performances, but that's not ideal. If I've learned anything, the more people you add into a show, the harder it is to tour. So,
one thing I'd like personally to be sure to ask you and Bart too is about the paper sculpture, which seems to be such an important part of Roser's technique, and you could see how that worked in the photos that I showed at the very beginning of this of our presentation this evening. But I wondered about how that functions in your own work, and in a way, like where that came from. Did Roser invent that paper sculpture technique himself? What do you guys get from this paper sculpture approach?
Well, Bart could probably lead this. The biggest thing I learned, I'll just say, when going to the Buoch Museum, is that they have the TV show that started the creation of this, because they said, hey, can you make puppets for this program? And he said, sure. And they said, great, you have like 40 of them to make, and you have a month, hurry up. And so paper sculpture came from this need of figuring out how to use a material quickly. And when you sculpt the faces, you can take one pattern, and by manipulating the paper in different ways, you can create multiple expressions, creating therefore multiple faces for multiple puppets. Now take it away, Bart.
Yeah, the use of paper in this way is an Albrecht Roser innovation. It is not origami. You are working with the tensions in the paper, and Albrecht would always say that the paper is your partner. You have to listen to it. Whereas he would point out that origami, you're imposing your will on the paper and telling it what it has to do. So he taught this. I learned it from him, and it is something that I teach now and I use regularly. We recently did a production of Curious Incident in Connecticut Repertory Theater, and I created in paper sculpture the rat and the baby, the puppy. And it's interesting that you can get both an abstract end result, or you can get an exact end result. My rat and my puppy looked like they were rats and puppies on the stage. So it's a really unique form, and part of the process of learning how to do it is teaching yourself how to see. You're looking for the shapes of cones and cylinders, convex cones, concave cones, and the idea, the challenge of it is to work with one sheet of paper. So it's not an additive process. It's all working within one material.
Yeah, it's quite
very I love it. And I'm very excited by it.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating from the outside to see the process and the results.
Around me here, I've got a few paper sculptures.
Right.
From Soldier's Tale, a clown figure that he made for me. One of the women of the night from Magic Flute. And also from Soldier's Tale.
Beautiful. So that the one you're holding right now, is that all one from one piece of paper, or like how?
Yes. much longer session to go into that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good, good.
If you want to take it at UConn.
Okay, good. Is that, will that not, but not online though? Is there, is one? Okay.
I mean, I can, which is,
Yeah.
but
Well,
students.
Something to think about. There's another question from Ki Hong Kim, who's happens to be a puppet arts graduate. She writes, I think she's talking about the way that sometimes string puppets have a kind of loose movement. She writes, the puppet's movement looks so stable in spite of the string puppets. Any special know-how?
It's, yeah, working with the placement of weight, the placement of the strings, it comes down to balance. And when all those parts come together, then you have actual control. And I don't have a ball and string. Everything that Roser and Ingrid do starts with this. Bart has it, of course, with this theories that stem from this ball and string and being able to move that in space and have control. And you start with something so simple. So as you are performing with the marionettes in a way, you turn off your thinking and you use your eyes to see and your hands to move. And as you're watching and you're grabbing and you move the controller, you feel where it goes and you know how to stop and bring it back. So it never sort of gets to the end and shakes. You're in control the whole time, watching what it's doing, following it almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that goes back to Albert's decision or interest in physics. Marionette is a pendulum. It's a series of pendulums.
Mm-hmm.
So we start with teaching how to work with a single pendulum on a string and learn how to control it.
Mm-hmm. And that would seem to relate to this center of gravity, aus dem Schwerpunkt gespielt idea.
Yeah.
Control is actually the wrong word. You're not trying to control it, you're trying to partner with it.
Right.
Learn to partner with gravity.
Right.
The strings don't, for the most part, come straight down. There's angles. So as this thing cannot swing, it's controlled by the strings coming in, and then it has movement. But essentially, it's being suspended by something larger than itself. The points are farther out. So you build the control into it's another reason why the controllers are built specifically to the figure, because if you tried to put the next figure on it, it wouldn't be a match. So I'm always changing the size of the circles on the hands, whatever I can do to make it so I can move it without it doing any of that in the end, or, drop.
Right.
Yeah. Got to get rid of all that.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process. And I appreciate Bart talking about it in terms of physics and also engineering, which is so essential to puppetry.
Yeah. Albrecht would come into the studio as you're struggling and I'm trying to get this move, I think, but it's not. And he would just walk up and go, put that string there, and walk away. And you try it any other way possible, and then when you finally gave in and you just put it where he said, it would have this beautiful movement. And it's like, man, he could just, from a distance, just knew where it had to go. He was that in tune.
Sure.
It's great. Yeah.
He had a strong sense of the object and how they moved and how you could make them move.
Yes. And would guide you that quietly.
Mm-hmm.
I dare you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, Oh.
There's another more general question from Polysonic. Where can we find your podcast, Sarah?
Oh, yeah. Just wait for it. Hold on.
Okay.
It's not up yet. Working together. Some recordings of, I guess you could call them superstars, just people with people involved in the puppetry scene with these lifetime of these. Just, I want to record it.
Well, maybe we can.
Golden.
when that comes to fruition, maybe we can share the link to your podcasts on our Ballard Institute site, on our Ballard Institute Facebook page, I think. I wondered if there's other things you wanted to mention? One of the things you suggested in some of your notes was how Roser's work influences your non-marionette puppetry, and I'm the work of yours that I've known, like your Wilson Bentley story, or some of the other shows you performed at the Ballard Institute are not in that Roser style marionette form. And so it's interesting to me too to think, how do you see these forms differently? What do you get out of them in different ways? Bart was saying he doesn't have a favorite puppet, which makes a lot of sense. But what kind of different effects or different results do you get from the different forms?
Yeah, it definitely challenges a different part of my brain and aesthetic. It makes me a better fine artist. Working in all the different materials, the level of detail that the Snowflake Man puppets have, they are so realistic, and then these are so abstract. Mm-hmm. So it definitely works a different part and expands my abilities as an artist in general. Mm-hmm. I think one of the biggest things I've gained from working with these controllers is you have most often, I mean, like I said, they can be made uniquely, but I have the one controller in one hand and then the other part in the other hand that moves the hands, and this is the main body, and it gets me to really work on how to isolate the two separately. And so when I go to do the Snowflake Man with the two check puppets at a time, I can sort of just do that thing of tuning off my mind. I look down, I observe, I follow the movement, the words sort of just spit out and it works. But I don't know that I would have been able to have performed that show with the duality so quickly if I hadn't worked with these. So which is great. This style really works. It really gets you to just put the puppet down and follow through with the movement and not be so conscious of the fact that you're holding onto it and you're making it go. It's just mm-hmm. moving in front of you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Earlier this evening, Bart mentioned this book, the Schwerpunkt book, and do we know when that's going to be published, and is it going to be in English as well as German, or what do we know about that?
The moment, to the best of my knowledge and chatting with Ingrid, is it will be published in German. The book is almost completed. There are pages of almost every marionette Roser made that he has a description, and Michael Mordo made the illustration to go with it, so it breaks down the controllers and the building of the figures. And then after Roser passed, Ingrid and Michael Mordo started to make some beginning chapters. So there is a chapter on the physics, there's a chapter on ball and string. It's to help give you the steps to get into these more complex figures. So there is a book, and then of course we all know sometimes when you have an idea or even something in front of you, the steps of getting it published are still need to be taken, but that's a possibility that's going to happen, but I can't tell you. I can't say when. Nobody knows. But
I'm aware that he does want the book to be published in English as well.
Would be nice. It would have to be translated. Woo. That's not a job for moi. Entschuldigen, ich kann kein Deutsch. But
I'm sorry, go ahead.
One question from Matthew Brooks, and I almost feel like there's a story attached to this, being that it's coming from Matthew. How do you feel about using the puppets outside?
Like under the sun? Yeah. I'll leave that to you, Mr. Brooks. Yeah. Like busking? No, that worries me. Yeah, that's just me. That's just me. My one outdoor show was with the Snowflake Man in 90-degree heat in the middle of Boston with the wind taking all the props away. First and last, I'm good. But
marionettes turn into good kites.
Yes, yeah. But in going this last fall, so the last 2 falls, I was able to go to Germany and perform with all these figures. I got to go to Charleville-Mézières to the festival with Alice Gottschalk, put me in her car, and my mom, Carol, was with me in the car, and we went to France. And the amount of puppetry that happens in the streets and everywhere, I mean, it's inspirational. So of course it's possible. I'm just nervous about it, but I'm not opposed to getting on a bar and performing, because that's what Alice and I did. Germany, the Unima Germany group found a stage and a time and set up some chairs. And then Alice and I said, if we perform on the floor, no one will see our marionettes. And then we said to the owner of this pub, can we climb on the bar? And he said, sure. So next thing you know, she and I are up there performing our pieces. So I'm down with that.
Great. Wonderful. There's a big tradition of puppets and bar performance too that you're taking part in.
I think you're right. Yeah, there's always a proust that happens in the end.
Very good.
So.
I think we're drawing somewhat to the close of our what we wanted to try to accomplish this evening. I really appreciate getting a better insight into Albrecht Roser's work, and certainly the way it's affected your work, Sarah, and Bart's work as well, which is I know that's a super huge aspect of Bart's approach, and I appreciate understanding that better. Are there other I guess closing things or other things we haven't said about Albrecht Roser and his influence, or how people could learn more about it?
Well, one thing they could do, I guess eventually it will be up. Jim Henson did a series of puppeteers around the world, and so Albrecht Roser was highlighted.
Right.
And then in the TV studio in Germany, where he made puppets for Roby Toby and Teleminkel and Telemuchen, now have DVD that also can be purchased. There are I wonder if they're on the shelf behind you, Bart, the yellow and the blue covered book, and then the 50th anniversary. There is parts of his work over there published with images. For the most part, I think we all have to really wait for the big book to come out to get to know him better. There's a limit of what is online. And in 2022, I hope everyone out there will join me at the Buoch Museum for the opening of his exhibition, because there is a room that's dedicated to him and his work that they are working to build displays and make that all happen, which is amazing, and it's
Right.
well deserved. So.
I also think that for those of us who have learned from him, as we lead others into what we're teaching them, we need to bring his name to the front. I mean, I don't think there's anybody who has graduated from the program at UConn in the past 30 years who doesn't know the elements that I have given them that he has shared with me.
Right. I was going to say, thinking of the way that Sarah talked about Roser urging you as a student of his to create your own work, in a way, the principles and maybe approaches of Albrecht Roser's work that you both have talked about seem to me to persist in all of the students who come out of the UConn program. You know, there's a little bit of Roser's perspective there. So maybe that's one of the ways that his work continues.
Yeah, for those who worked with Roser, I feel there is a piece of his heart in our hearts now. And then Bart does really well in the program to bring that across. So when you're making things that are of his techniques and theories and design, you feel you are with him and you know him. So that's, I mean, as you know, that's what gives art a purpose. That's what gives it a higher meaning, makes it art. So.
Great. Well, this has been really wonderful and insightful, and I've learned a lot, which I appreciate. And it's really fascinating to learn more about Albrecht Roser and also your own work, Sarah. We've always appreciated it when you've been able to perform your shows at the Ballard Institute. They're always very high artistic quality and very exciting. So I hope, you know, who knows when, that you'll come back physically to perform at the Ballard Institute.
It's a wonderful museum. So
I wanted to mention some upcoming events, part of our online programming that Emily Wicks has been so agile in working on. This Wednesday, May 13th at 2 p.m., as part of our ongoing Wednesday and Friday puppet workshop series, Elise Van Ass, a puppet art student, will be doing a workshop on paper fortune teller puppets. She'll also be doing a Picasso-inspired abstract mask workshop on Friday at 2 p.m. And this Saturday, we will be taking a virtual visit with a visit to Cozy Corner with Cozy Arts Productions, which is another puppet arts graduate, Faye Dupras, who's now in Somerville, Massachusetts. That's going to be Facebook Live on Saturday, the 16th at 2 p.m. And a week later, on Saturday, May 23rd, we will have a virtual visit with String Theory Theater. They were going to perform a show called Kitty's Corner. They're in Baltimore. Dirk Joseph and his daughters will visit them. And great. We've been listed as a co-host for a free streaming of A Balinese Tempest, followed by a live Q&A, a question and answer session. And that's some of the puppets from A Balinese Tempest are part of our current exhibit that no one can see because we're shut down, but that's going to be super interesting. So we hope that you'll continue to take a look at the Ballard Institute online offerings and share with us your suggestions and questions. And what do we want to say? I wanted to say that the Puppet Arts program has an online certificate program. So for many years, the Puppet Arts program has offered teaching puppet classes online. So that's possible. And I hope we can get together again. Bart, I wanted to turn to you. If you have other thoughts to add at this juncture.
No, John, you're doing a great job. I did want to just add that the Balinese Tempest is Larry Reed's company.
Larry Reed, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for mentioning Larry Reed. Okay.
Everybody to pay attention to what's happening on the Ballard site. There's some really exciting things going on, and it's great to be in touch with all. Lovely to see Ki-Hong Kim's name.
Yeah. Good. Well, it's great to be part of this puppet community and now this online puppet community, plus other people who might just be interested in everything that's happening. So thank you, Bart Roccoberton, for taking the time to be here and add your expertise, dropping knowledge. And thank you, Sarah Frechette, for your wonderful work, those videos of your work and your explanation of the work of Albrecht Roser and how that's become, in a way, part of your own work. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, John, Bart, Emily, Bimp, and to you out there. Danke, danke, danke schön.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much to the audience for coming. Thank you very much.